Lord, Heavenly Father, fount of all solace and secure refuge, we turn to you today with heavy hearts, yet brimming with hope. We acknowledge that in our human frailty, anxiety can insidiously permeate our lives, eclipsing joy and transforming the familiar into a minefield of apprehension. A point arrives where this fog of worry thickens, morphing into a paralyzing dread of crossing the threshold of our homes, of confronting the world beyond. It is a self-imposed isolation, an invisible prison erected by the very racing of our hearts and the torrent of restless thoughts within our minds. It is not a lack of love for our fellow man, nor an absence of desire to engage in life's fullness, but rather an internal struggle that holds us captive, preventing us from heeding your grace's call in communion with creation. This condition, Lord, is not a character flaw nor a failure of faith, but a genuine battle that many of your children face in silence. The home, which ought to be a sanctuary of peace and repose, becomes the sole tolerable haven, while the external world, with its sounds, people, and unforeseen events, presents itself as an imminent threat. The mere prospect of venturing out, whether for work, a social engagement, to procure sustenance, or to seek shelter within your house of prayer, ignites an overwhelming wave of panic. The body reacts with stark physical manifestations: cold sweats, intense palpitations, shortness of breath, trembling, dizziness, nausea, a chorus of alarm screaming danger where, in a state of peace, no genuine threat exists. The mind, in turn, becomes ensnared in catastrophic scenarios, anticipating humiliation, judgment, or loss of control, feeding a vicious cycle that reinforces the aversion to leaving. Our journey here, O Father, seeks not to diminish this struggle, but rather to cast light into the darkness, offering a perspective of healing and restoration through your word and your unconditional love. We understand that for those afflicted by this anxiety that manifests as agoraphobia, faith can often seem distant, obscured by the internal tempest. Prayer may feel like a Herculean endeavor when mere breathing is challenging. Yet, it is precisely in these moments of profound vulnerability that your strength is fully revealed. We seek not magic formulas or simplistic answers, but rather a deep immersion in the truth that we are loved, that we are not alone in this battle, and that in you, we find the bedrock upon which to rebuild confidence in our capacity to face the world with serenity and courage. This moment of prayer is an invitation to suspend judgment, to embrace with compassion those who feel ensnared in their homes by the invisible web of anxiety and fear. It is an acknowledgement that this struggle is spiritual, emotional, and physical, and that healing arises from a holistic approach rooted in faith and hope. May this be an intimate conversation with you, wherein we may deposit our burdens, our afflictions, and our fears, knowing that in your arms we find safety and solace. May your peace, which surpasses all understanding, begin to permeate our hearts, dispelling the shadows of fear and reigniting the flame of hope that propels us toward the freedom only you can grant. May we find in you the strength to take the first step and then the next, trusting that your hand will guide and sustain us in each one. Lord, on our journey of faith, we encounter less traveled paths, where the light of your truth can dissipate the shadows of uncertainty that manifest as an impediment to full participation in life. The reluctance to leave home, born of anxiety, can also be interpreted as a silent cry for a rediscovery of one's identity, a yearning to discern what is genuinely ours amidst social pressures and external expectations. Often, agoraphobic fear is not merely of open space, but of implicit judgment, of the feeling of exposure that reveals deep insecurities, of the belief that we lack the internal resources to navigate the complexities of human interaction. It is at this core that the temptation to withdraw becomes strongest, confining the spirit within a cocoon of self-protection that paradoxically enfeebles the very soul. Furthermore, this aversion to the outside world can manifest as a difficulty in discerning subtle social cues, in interpreting intentions, or in responding appropriately to unforeseen situations. The anxious mind, operating in a state of heightened alert, tends to interpret neutral or ambiguous events as potential threats, exacerbating the need for control and the predictability that home provides. This hypervigilance depletes mental resources, rendering the prospect of a less controlled environment, such as a bustling street or a social gathering, frankly unendurable. It is as if the brain, overburdened with processing perceived dangers, actively seeks to avoid any stimulus that might trigger this stress response. In light of this, the request to simply go out can sound like a plea to traverse a minefield without a map, without training, and with the certainty that each step could lead to ruin. Furthermore, it is imperative to acknowledge that the anxiety which paralyzes and prevents one from leaving home may be intimately intertwined with past traumatic experiences or a persistent feeling of inadequacy. The home then becomes a sanctuary where these wounds appear less exposed, where the past dares not haunt with the same intensity. However, by withdrawing from social interaction, we risk perpetuating the cycle of isolation and suffering, denying ourselves the opportunity for healing that arises from connection, mutual support, and the very act of overcoming. Faith teaches us that shared vulnerability can be a source of strength, and that trust in your providence empowers us to confront the fears that surround us, gradually transforming them into stepping stones towards a more complete freedom. We must, therefore, interrogate ourselves about the roots of this fear. What ancient echoes resonate within the walls of our seclusion? In the interim, as we contemplate these depths, it is also crucial that we begin to glimpse the divine tools offered to us for dismantling these barriers. Prayer, for instance, is not merely a plea for assistance, but an active exercise in redirecting the focus of our attention from perceived danger to your constant and saving presence. By meditating on your promise that you will never abandon us, even when we traverse the valley of the shadow of death, which can be metaphorical